Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled Chemtrails Increase Greenhouse Effect, Indicating a Weakening Sun. Now, U.S. Patent 5003186 from 1991 describes the seeding of the stratosphere with metal oxide, such as aluminum oxide or thorium oxide, to reduce global warming. These particles have very low reflectivity and would absorb black-body radiation emitted by the Earth at the near-infrared wavelength and convert it to visible and far-infrared wavelength, so that this heat may be re-radiated out into space. And here is the patent. Now, near-infrared radiation is infrared radiation closest to visible light. So here we have the visible light part of the spectrum. On this end we have cosmic rays, they're the highest energy radiation we get in the universe, and on the other end is radio waves, and these are the lowest energy light waves in the universe. So visible light is what the human eye detects. Infrared is on the lower energy side of that, and what the Earth emits from its surface is near infrared, so that's closest to visible light, so that's higher energy than what infrared comes from this side of the spectrum, which would be called far infrared. And these are short wavelength, this radiation on this side, on the visible light side, and these are of long wavelength. So the patent description also mentions that it has been suggested that the use of high reflectivity particles or metallic particles when dispersed in the atmosphere should decrease global warming. So this is not what this patent is about. It's just describing what other patents had described. And it also mentions that one of the methods proposed to disperse these microparticles into the atmosphere is to add them to the fuel of jet planes, so that they should be injected in the atmosphere when the aircraft is at high altitude. But instead of decreasing global warming, these high reflectivity particles will have the opposite effect. Because high reflectivity particles, although causing visible light to be reflected back into space, would trap the long wavelength black body radiation released by the Earth and result in a net increase in global warming. Since chemtrails contain large amounts of metallic particles of high reflectivity, which is why the atmosphere is so hazy, and visibility through it has decreased dramatically. That seems to be what is desired by the powers that be. So we do not see outside of our atmosphere, so they have to use high reflectivity particles. But that means that chemtrails are trapping heat released by the Earth instead of releasing heat. And this is another indication that global warming is a hoax and an excuse to deceive the world's population. So what we see here is a representation of what occurs, the mechanism behind the greenhouse effect. So the Earth's surface releases infrared radiation, near infrared radiation, and because of the presence of greenhouse gases and high reflectivity particles high up in the atmosphere injected through the chemtrail mechanism, this radiation emitted by the Earth gets reflected back towards the surface and thus keeps heat within the atmosphere. Now, the heat emitted by the Earth is not just heat that it absorbs from the sun, as I have written in several articles, including article 192, entitled Neutron Stars and Fission as a Star's Internal Energy Source. The Earth's surface emits radiation because it generates heat or gravitational energy in its core through fission. That is the decay of particles of nuclei that are unstable, and they are present within the core. And all objects, including stars, planets, have this ability to generate heat, generate gravitational energy, and the stellar cores, of course, are coming in and absorbing that energy. So the Earth emits near or short wavelength, which is the highest energy infrared. So, and this portion of the infrared spectrum, so there's the infrared spectrum, and it's expanded into this larger part. Here's the near, this is the medium, this is the far infrared, this is the lowest energy infrared. So if there are low reflectivity particles in the atmosphere, this infrared radiation will be absorbed and re-emitted as visible and far or long wavelength infrared radiation. So if we have low reflectivity particles, then the near infrared radiation emitted by the surface of the Earth is absorbed and re-emitted as visible light, which is in this part here, and far infrared. And that will then be re-emitted into space. But if we have high reflectivity particles, then all that happens is that the near infrared radiation emitted by the Earth is reflected back into the atmosphere. So it increases the greenhouse effect. Now, the reason why the powers that be find it necessary to trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere is because the Sun has been severely weakened by the presence of the stellar cores in the solar system, as I've detailed in Article 195, entitled Stellar Cores and the Dying Sun. The mechanism through which the stellar cores draw energy from the Sun is explained in Article 203, entitled Stellar Cores Drawing Energy from the Sun. And if it is a greenhouse effect that is needed, then greenhouse gases should be encouraged rather than taxed. But the use of metallic particles makes the atmosphere conductive, and thus easier to manipulate through electromagnetic means in order to wage war on the civilian population and hide what is going on in the solar system regarding the stellar cores. And that's because the atmosphere becomes more reflective of light, and therefore it makes it more difficult to see any objects that are outside our atmosphere. So in addition, these metallic particles are highly toxic to life on Earth, and this indicates that a decrease in human and animal population is sought as an outcome. In conclusion, although the reason most offered for the use of chemtrails is to counteract global warming and reflect radiation back into space, the type of particle being used can only reflect visible light and traps heat emitted by the Earth in the atmosphere, thereby increasing any greenhouse effect. This indicates the Sun is weakening and agrees with other evidence suggesting that the Sun is increasingly weaker due to the presence of the stellar cores in the solar system. However, this continues to be hidden from the Earth's population. And there are the few references. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.